So you're all very welcome to this discussion this afternoon, where I'm delighted to be in conversation with Dr. Pauline Frizzell, who is a key person in the academic team relating to speech and language therapies at University College Cork. Good afternoon, Pauline. You're very welcome.
Hello, and thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Pauline, let me start. What is the reference code for this degree?
The reference code is CK705.
So CK would be Cork, presumably.
Yes, and that's the code you look up, and that's the BSc in Speech and Language Therapy.
And what is a BSc in Speech and Language Therapy?
Well, it's a 4-year degree, and speech and language therapy, the important thing as well is that it's not just a degree, but it's also a professional qualification. So unlike many other undergraduate degrees, it has this added component of being a professional qualification. And speech and language therapy is all about working with people with communication difficulties and swallowing difficulties. So this could include children who have difficulty understanding what other people are saying to them, or who have difficulty putting words together to make sentences, or speaking, just to learn to use their first language. It can also be with children who might have an intellectual disability, maybe because they're born with it, for example, in the case of Down syndrome, or it might be that they acquired it because of maybe an accident, like a road traffic accident. We also work with people with autism and people maybe with a physical disability, for example, something like cerebral palsy. And then there's also, we work with a lot of adults also. So for example, adults with intellectual disability or adults with neurological impairments. So for example, after a stroke or after a head injury, or indeed as a result of maybe a disease, for example, like motor neuron disease or multiple sclerosis, dementia, Parkinson's. So there's really a really broad range of individuals that you can work with as a speech and language therapist. And I often think that that's one of the real selling points of SLT, as we call it for short, because I sometimes think if you've an interest in medicine and if you've an interest in education, that we sort of we straddle both fields because we study quite a lot of aspects in both areas. So I think that speech and language therapy can be the ideal career for you if you sort of have a leg or an interest in both areas, if you like.
It's a clinical
degree. Yes. But interestingly, we can work in education or we can work in medicine, so to sort of in medical fields or educational fields. And I suppose the course aims to provide people with the knowledge and the skills and the confidence to work in a career that will help people to develop their communication and or swallowing difficulties. And we study like a broad range of subjects. So for example, things like anatomy, physiology, neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, linguistics, phonetics, speech science, behavioral science, and of course, as well as speech and language therapy theory and assessment and intervention techniques. So there's kind of a broad range there.
And so obviously the people you deal with, it's young, it's old, it's
across the full spectrum, from babies, from very young babies who could have feeding problems with like nasogastric tubes, or even working with parents. And we work a lot in areas of social disadvantage to try and promote good practices and try and narrow the gap that can often exist between those who are from socially disadvantaged areas relative to those from more affluent backgrounds.
And can people, just as a matter of interest, develop speech difficulties throughout life other than as a result of accident?
Well, as a result of a stroke, for example, if you have a stroke, you would develop, or as I was saying, there are certain diseases that are associated. So these kind of group of progressive neurological diseases that are associated with people losing their ability to speak. There are lots of things like, they're called speech banks, where sometimes we store people's speech while they can still talk, so that their own speech can be used on electronic devices at a later point when it's needed. So they can actually then communicate with their own voice for as long as we possibly can allow them do so.
So it's obviously a degree that involves the use of technology.
Yes, yes.
It's an interesting point, because some people would have an interest in technology and the use of technology, and therefore what this degree represents is just one example of...
Well, there's a whole area called what's referred to as alternative and augmentative communication systems. It's called AAC for short. And some of those systems are what we call unaided systems. So for example, a signing system is unaided, but we also have aided systems, which would involve electronic devices. For example, the synthetic speech device that Stephen Hawking would have used. That would be a very sort of a famous example of one. And those devices have really, really improved over the last 10 years. So for example, for many years, there was just one voice and everybody had the same generic voice, that this synthesized voice, whereas now there's a huge range of voices out there. There's wonderful work being done in voice donation, for example. So, you know, you can donate your voice to help somebody else who has difficulty speaking, because the speech comes from the articulators, whereas the voice comes from the larynx. So you can donate your voice to help if you record enough of different speech sounds and different words. So it's a fascinating area, and also the whole system of electronic devices like around eye gaze systems. So for example, many people with really severe physical difficulties have great difficulty accessing a device. So you might have the most wonderful device, but if they can't use their hands to touch it, for example, or they may use a switch or a head switch to make the device work. But now, of course, we have eye gaze systems, which allows you to control a device using your eyes. So that's really opened up a world. Now, the technology is improving all of the time, but this is all part of it. All comes under speech and language and communication. And I think people, because of the title, people think sometimes about the speech aspect, and of course don't realize the extent of all this different work. So really sort of communication and swallowing probably, is a better characterization of what we do.
It actually sounds fascinating, very far reaching and very broad base. And,
yes.
You know, it really, really is, Pauline. And how long is the degree?
It's a 4-year degree.
And why would you study it at University College Cork?
Well, why not? One of the reasons you would study in University College Cork, one of the things that's really unique to our program is the problem-based learning curriculum that we offer. So there are other programs that use small components of problem-based learning, but ours is really integrated and embedded into it's kind of the main way we run our program. And then the lectures are integrated to support the problem-based learning program. So how that works is that your students work through a problem, if you like, a clinical problem each week using a particular process, stepped process, and they work in small groups and tutorials, and it operates with continual assessment. So you are kind of given points for your contribution to the group and your contribution to the discussion and how you figure it out. So it's about problem-based learning. Literally, the key is in the title. And that's very unique to UCC in that we're the only program in Ireland who runs a full problem-based learning degree. Another reason I suppose you'd focus on why you'd study in UCC really is to do with the strong practical education. So, you know, and we also offer opportunities for students to graduate with some dysphagia competence. So dysphagia is the whole area of swallowing disorders, and our graduates have some competence in dysphagia, and they also have some competence in sign language, which not all courses would offer that. And we also have a very vibrant in-house clinic. So the Brookfield Speech and Language Therapy Clinic is on site. So that also offers opportunities, and there are clients coming and going, and it offers opportunities for students, you know. And also our course is embedded within the College of Medicine and Health. So it's the School of Clinical Therapies and in the College of Medicine and Health. So because of that, there are opportunities to work with other healthcare professionals. So for example, our program is integrated with the occupational therapy program for some modules, and also with audiology. And now, of course, we have a new master's in physiotherapy. And that also means that there are opportunities there to do cross-disciplinary research work and research projects, you know. So it's really developing this kind of multidisciplinary team concept before you go out into the working world, because that's, of course, how you work. When you work in practice, you work in teams. Also, I suppose in relation to our staff, we have international staff, which gives an element of diversity to the program, and our staff are very friendly, of course, and they've qualified, they're highly qualified, but they've also won prizes for teaching and research, and trying to think what else. We also offer actually student learning support. Like we have this personal academic tutor system, so that we're offering support to students, and if they want to come and talk to us about something, that opportunity is there, and there's a designated person that they know that they can speak to in confidence. Our department is also very research active, and we have internationally funded programs, for example, research in areas like Down syndrome, in developmental language disorder, bilingualism, the use of ultrasound and speech sound disorders, and also in acquired brain injury. And the facilities are really great. We have some state-of-the-art facilities. There's a new laboratory in the anatomy lab called the Flame Lab. It's the facility for learning anatomy and morphology and embryology. That's what it stands for. But
okay.
It's a state-of-the-art lab, as I understand it. And so we also have opportunities for students to attend conferences and to be very involved and to study at postgraduate level, I suppose, really.
And we'll come to the postgraduate elements in a moment. But I wanted to ask you first about the accreditation of this degree. And it's accreditation of the profession.
So because it's a professional qualification, it's accredited by the Irish Association of Speech and Language Therapists. So that's the IASLT. It's approved by the CORU Registration Board. So that's the body that is responsible for maintaining the register of therapists working in Ireland, and to ensure that there's a certain standard of proficiency for the speech and language therapy community to work and to say that you are a speech and language therapist. So when you graduate, you must register with CORU before you can actually practice as an SLT in Ireland.
And while you're going through your degree, do the students have an opportunity of having work or clinical placements?
Yes, the clinical program is very kind of central to the degree throughout the 4 years. And we have clinical placements in lots of different sites. So to reflect, I suppose, the broad areas that you can end up working in. So for example, we have clinical placements that could be in hospitals, in schools, in disability services, in community care, and obviously as well in our own Brookfield clinic, we offer placements there too. And the placements take place usually in the southern part of the country. So there's that sort of understanding between the colleges. So ours will be in the southern part of the country. So students could be expected to travel a little bit of a distance to go to their placement, or if they're on a longer term placement, they may need to get some accommodation in that area. But we usually try to accommodate students as much as possible so that they're not traveling unnecessarily. For example, if somebody was on the course and they were from Kerry, we might try and place them in Kerry. The placements as well. So in first year, it's really just about sort of an introduction to speech and language therapy and, professional conduct. So their first placement takes place at the very end of first year. It's just a 5-day placement. And then in second year, the focus is all on pediatric work. So it's placements around pediatric, anything to do with communication impairments in pediatric or swallowing. And then third year has an adult focus. So we would then be looking at placements to do with adult neurological conditions or swallowing. And sometimes we have some pediatric placements in third year too, but the kind of focus is more on adults. And then in fourth year, that's really sort of the transition, if you like, from the university into the workplace. And so students would then have their own caseload that they would be expected to manage under supervision. And they usually have one very long placement. So it would be about, say, 26, 28 days, something like that. And how that's administered then really depends on the placement site. So it could be 2 days a week for 13 weeks, or it could be 3 days a week for 9 weeks, and so on. It just depends on the site itself. So so placement is really integral throughout the program.
And how does the placement work? In other words, is it organized and arranged through the school, or is it arranged by the student prepared then for going out?
True. We have a practice education coordinator and we have practice tutors. So there's a whole sort of practice education team as well as sort of an academic team. And so the practice education team are responsible for organizing all placement. And then we have practice tutors who support students on placement. So that's how that works. So the students don't have any involvement in organizing placements.
So essentially, as they're going through, they're being taught, we call it, employability skills.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I presume some of those are in the curriculum, or are they extracurricular?
The employability skills are central to the curriculum throughout absolutely.
So Pauline, what are the work opportunities for a graduate?
Well, in terms of working internationally, we have a mutual recognition of our degree with the UK. So the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists recognises our degree, making it very easy to go and work in the UK. We also have mutual recognition with Speech Pathology Australia. And so we can work in Australia, and there are that leads to other opportunities also to work in New Zealand and South Africa. There are some countries in which you need a postgraduate degree in order to go and work there. So for example, if you wanted to go and work in Canada, you would need to have a master's. In terms of working at home, well, our graduates are prepared to have the skills to work in a variety of different areas. As I said, all of these different settings that we typically work in. And also, of course, therapists can work in private practice. You can't work in private practice immediately because you need to be, unless you have very strong supervision, you need usually to be supervised for 3 years before you can start to work more independently. In terms of career opportunities, we also have an increasing number of students now who might choose to do a postgraduate degree, for example, a master's. And for example, some students do the audiology degree, which is based in our Brookfield Clinic, and it's the only one that exists in Ireland. So, and it's a very related area, and therapists that choose to do that then have a dual qualification, which is particularly attractive if you're thinking of working in private practice, that you can be both an audiologist and a speech and language therapist. And in other countries, the degree of speech and language therapy is automatically a dual qualification. So our degree doesn't quite meet the audiological hours in Ireland, and that's the policy within Ireland and indeed within the UK. But as I said, there are some countries that a dual qualification is part of the degree. So some students choose to do that. And then there are also opportunities to complete a PhD by research or and kind of to contribute, I suppose, to the new research that's happening in our field. We're moving closer all the time to having research practitioners, because it's so important to have the science and the evidence behind what we do.
It's
so
very
broadly speaking,
it's very broad and very interesting. I mean, there's so many elements to it. And from what you're saying, Pauline, most people go on to be practicing therapists.
They do.
Those, but really, you embark on the degree with the intention of having that clinical profession.
Yes, I mean, therapists, it's a clinical degree. So, I suppose there are some degrees there that have a very generic sort of remit, and people don't really have any concept of what they might do at the end of that degree. Whereas I think because this is a named profession, it's one of those ones that people go into it thinking, I am going to be a speech and language therapist. And of course, it does offer many other opportunities, but the majority of our students are interested in being clinicians rather than researchers.
So Pauline, what do UCC graduates offer employers?
Well, apart from a high standard of skills within speech and language therapy, there are a number of attributes that UCC aims to instill in their graduates. So the aim would be that we would produce students that are creators and communicators of knowledge, and really participating in the PBL program gives our graduate skills beyond specific knowledge in particular areas. They learn to apply their knowledge in a very sophisticated way to solve real life problems, and they learn to evaluate their own learning on a topic, which is a really important skill, to reflect on their own learning and to reflect on how they're performing. And that's something that's very important within any employer, for any employer. And PBL also involves these kind of frequent small group presentations, which give graduates the experience to communicate their learning on a particular topic to others. So they get used to that sort of presentation. We also believe that our graduates are independent and creative thinkers, and this kind of completion of the final year project, bringing a project from start to completion, and really thinking about, engaging in independent thinking around what that project might be, and creative thinking about how their research might contribute to the field of speech and language therapy. We really feel that facilitates those attributes. We also expect that our graduates are digitally fluent, and they're used to using these online learning platforms, for example, like Canvas. And we also use software for speech analysis, we use software in language analysis, and also for statistical analysis. So they become familiar with a number of different packages in the undergraduate program. And then, of course, at the moment, the way things are, students are getting experience with telepractice and the online platforms that allow that to happen, that facilitate that. And then, of course, as we mentioned earlier, the whole area of alternative augmentative communication systems means that they have become digitally fluent, or certainly have an awareness around programming some of these devices for use with in clinical practice. And I suppose the other attributes that UCC are valuing very highly in their students is this sense of being socially responsible and recognizing and challenging inequality. And I suppose we have a lot of opportunities during placement and volunteer experiences to work with a range of people with disabilities. So our program encourages graduates to be advocates for social inclusion and for the rights of people with disabilities, as well as those who are socially disadvantaged. And students are encouraged to participate in disability awareness campaigns. For example, one recent day we had was International DLD Day, which stands for Developmental Language Disorder. And it's about raising awareness for this condition, which is quite a hidden condition and not one that a lot of people are aware of. So they're kind of some of the ways that we believe that our graduates have those attributes that are really important for employers.
And going back again on your PBL, the problem-based learning, and that being a unique selling point of University College Cork, I think that it actually permeates everything you do, really, doesn't it? Problem-based learning.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah. And do the students ever take time out? Can you take time out of the degree, maybe go away for a year?
Yes. So in terms of having kind of experience abroad, students have the opportunity to take a year out if they would like to and get experience abroad. And lots of our graduates also go abroad after they qualify to get some experience, just to experience a new country and bring different levels of expertise home with them.
And Pauline, you were mentioning earlier the research interests of many of the academic team in the school. And so can you talk a little bit about the links to research centres and to research expertise?
Well, I suppose we're forming new links all the time. For example, I was linked to the Ucc group, which is the Oxford Study for Children's Communication Impairments, when I was there doing research work with there. We also have links with, for example, Dementia Research Network in Ireland and Palliative Care Research Network. There are a number of links, but really they are very much dependent on what research is happening at any given point in time.
And interestingly, you and I are speaking this afternoon on a digital platform. And so speech and language therapy, we're using our voices. We can't very much use our bodies in the same way as we might have used before. So is this a pivotal moment in the evolution of the profession?
Well, certainly the digital age has changed the profession quite a bit in terms of what's open to people. I mean, I think that's something that permeates across all the field of medicine, because they are able to save children and adults who would have been very sick, who previously would have not been able to survive. And now those children and adults are able to survive, but they come with particular difficulties and needs. And so we have new challenges to address those needs. And the digital field can often facilitate that.
And what opportunities do students have for personal and professional development?
Well, I believe our whole program is developed around personal and professional development, in that it's this professional qualification and not just a degree. But there are other, I suppose, unique points. We use what's called visual thinking strategies, which is used within the College of Medicine and Health, and it's which is training in critical thinking and collaborative skills. And there are also a number of voluntary community outreach programs, and students can be involved in the ISLT Student Conference and Student Committee. There's the Clinical Therapy Society. So there are a number of those societies, and one actually interesting innovation that came out of the Clinical Therapy Society was set up a number of years ago in collaboration with Dr. Helen Kelly in our department, was the Aphasia Cafe. Which is a cafe which is open in Cork City. And actually in 2020, it was really interesting, speaking again of technology, the cafe went online, so in this year, and so now it's reaching out to people far beyond those in Cork, to people in Ireland and even outside of Ireland, and it's just acting as a community of support, reducing people's isolation. And the students actually can do a digital badge, so they can do this Aphasia Cafe digital badge, which gives them this kind of unique opportunity to have a positive societal impact, while at the same time gaining skills themselves and getting experience in supporting adults who've had a stroke and in communicating with them.
It's such a holistic approach to education, isn't it?
And the students really enjoy those kinds of things, they really enjoy those experiences because they can see the value of it.
And I suppose through that they can see opportunities, we'll almost call it entrepreneurial or innovative opportunities, if they want to pursue those.
Yes. I suppose we've other innovations in the department as well, where, for example, developing new ways of assessment in clinical practice, and students have the opportunity to be involved in that through research projects.
And how would somebody who's considering participating or taking this degree find out more about the degree and about the profession?
So in terms of our specific degree, they can go onto the Ucc website, and if you use the project code CK705, that will give you lots of information about this specific degree. There's also a vast amount of information on the Irish Association of Speech and Language Therapy website, which is IASLT, and also the Royal College Speech and Language Therapy website, which is RCSLT. So that's the UK one. And the other one that we use quite a bit for information is the American Speech, Language and Hearing Association. So that's called ASHA. And any of those websites will give you, a great overview of the different areas that can be involved in speech and language therapy.
So, Pauline, are there any myths about speech and language therapy that you'd like to dispel?
But I suppose a lot of people thought that speech and language therapy was about elocution years ago. Or speech and drama. But I think that's less of an issue now.
So, Pauline, it's been an absolutely great pleasure to speak to you this afternoon. And I think many of our listeners will have enjoyed what I had the privilege of enjoying. And we wish you and your colleagues continued success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Employability and career development initiatives are delivered through curricular, co-curricular and extracurricular activities. Over 90% of our programs offer placements internationally and nationally. Throughout your time in UCC, you will have the opportunity to develop employability skills through entrepreneurship modules, skill sessions, and memberships of clubs, societies, becoming a class representative, and getting involved. Throughout your student journey, Ucc Career Services will support your career planning with one-to-one career consultations and coaching. The Career Services collaborate with academic departments and other UCC units to deliver bespoke and standalone employability and career-related workshops and events for all students and recent graduates. Our annual Recruitment Fair is one of the largest national career fairs, featuring up to 100 top graduate employers. For more information about UCC employability initiatives and the Career Services, visit ucc.ie/careers.